Welcome to our channel, a place where everyday stories are told to remind us that no matter how busy or weary life becomes, as long as we still hold a little faith, a little gratitude, everything can begin again. Here, we don't talk about success found in thick books, but about the small moments of real life. Those times when you fall, lose direction, and then suddenly realize something that helps you rise again. Today's story is about a man who once thought his life was nothing but repetition and emptiness. He didn't know that the very ordinary things we often overlook are sometimes the most precious. Things others would give anything to have again. And sometimes, only when we are forced to lie still in a hospital bed do we truly understand what freedom means and what simple happiness really is. Just to be able to walk beneath the morning sunlight. Please join us in listening to the story. When we realize the value of ordinary things. John was a 33-year-old office worker living in a small apartment in the heart of the city. Every morning, he left home at 7, blending into the crowd that poured onto the streets amid the chaos of car horns and hurried footsteps on the pavement. On the train, he would unlock his phone, scroll through the news, then close it again, already forgetting what he had just read. Everything repeated itself over and over, like a wheel that never stopped turning. John's job wasn't bad. He had a stable income, pleasant coworkers, his own desk, and a clear career path. But somehow, the more time passed, the emptier he felt. Long meetings drained his energy. Endless emails left him unsure of what he was even working toward. He still smiled when he needed to, still looked busy on the outside, but deep down, John felt he was merely existing, not truly living. Sometimes, during lunch breaks, he would glance out the window and see sunlight falling across the trees on the other side of the street. People were walking, talking, laughing. A fleeting thought, soft and almost unnoticeable, slipped into his mind. How long has it been since I last walked under the sunlight? But just seconds later, the phone rang, and he went back to his waiting reports. Lately, John had been feeling tired. His body felt heavy, and sometimes he grew dizzy. He told himself it was just lack of sleep, just stress, and forced another cup of coffee to stay awake. Work still had to be done. Deadlines still had to be met. He didn't want to appear weak. He didn't want to take a day off for something as small as fatigue. John had always believed that happiness was a destination. That only when he had a bigger house, a higher position, a more secure life, only then would he be allowed to feel at peace. For now, he thought, this was just the waiting period before making it. He never realized that these ordinary mornings, these hurried breaths, might already be happiness itself. That evening, after work, John stepped outside. The last sunlight of the day spilled across the wet pavement after a light rain. He squinted against the brightness, opened his umbrella, and hurried toward the station. That sunlight, the very thing he avoided, would soon become the image he would miss the most in the days ahead. But at that moment, John had no idea his life was about to turn in a completely different direction. John's fatigue grew worse one Monday morning. He woke up with a sharp pain in his chest and heavy, labored breathing. For the first time in years, he couldn't go to work. A colleague called a taxi and took him to the hospital, and only a few hours later, the doctor told him he had to be admitted for heart monitoring. John lay still on the white hospital bed, under the cold fluorescent light, listening to the steady beeping of the heart monitor beside him. In the first few days, he brought his laptop along and tried to keep working from the hospital bed. But after only a short while, his body grew weaker, and all efforts became meaningless. He could do nothing now but lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the footsteps of nurses and the soft rolling of carts down the hallway. For the first time in his life, John could no longer do anything. He could only exist. One morning, he woke up earlier than usual and saw sunlight spilling through the window. Thin, golden rays stretched across the wall, reflected softly on the white tile floor. Outside, a few people were walking in the hospital courtyard. An old man exercising, a nurse carrying a jug of water, a laughing child. John watched them for a long time. A strange feeling spread through his body, warm and aching at the same time. He realized he longed to stand, to go outside, to feel sunlight on his skin. The same sunlight he used to avoid every day. The same light he once thought of as annoying. Now, just seeing it made his eyes fill with tears. It wasn't fear of illness that moved him, but the sudden understanding that he had been walking through his own life without ever truly living it. John closed his eyes. He felt his heartbeat, the rhythmic sound of the monitor, the slow rise and fall of his breath. Every small thing, the whisper of wind, the faint scent of antiseptic, the light filtering through the curtain, suddenly felt vividly alive. A quiet thought floated through his mind, clear and gentle. If I could step outside again, just to walk under the sunlight, that alone would make me happy. In that moment, John no longer needed anything else. Not position, not salary, not praise. He just wanted to live, fully, simply, and with gratitude. The sunlight kept falling across the floor, shimmering as if it were smiling at him. And in that silence, something within John quietly shifted. A small rebirth, tender, yet profound. In the days that followed, John remained in the hospital, but something inside him had changed. He no longer pressed the doctor, asking when he could be discharged, nor did he grow frustrated that his work was being delayed. Instead, he began to listen to his own body, something he had ignored for years. Every morning, when the nurse drew back the curtains, he would watch the first rays of sunlight flood gently into the room, soft and golden. That alone was enough to fill his heart with a quiet peace. In the afternoons, he started writing short lines in a small notebook. Thank you for my breath. Thank you for my heart that still beats. Thank you for my eyes that can still see the light. Simple words, yet to John now, they were the most important things in the world. He realized that before all this, he had lived like someone deaf and blind, unable to hear, unable to see, unable to feel anything beyond pressure and endless ambition. When his health improved, he was allowed to take short walks in the hospital courtyard. His first step under the sunlight nearly brought him to tears. The ground no longer felt like cold, gray concrete. It felt warm, as if it were holding him up. The wind brushed against his skin, the sunlight wove through his hair, and the faint scent of grass drifted in the air. He walked slowly, carefully, as if afraid that everything might disappear if he moved too fast. After being discharged, John changed many things, not through promises, but through small actions. He began walking every morning before going to work. He turned off his phone during meals, looked directly at the person in front of him, and truly listened. Whenever stress returned, he simply paused, took a deep breath, and remembered that morning sunlight. The world around him hadn't changed, the work, the city, the noise, but the way he saw it had. John no longer demanded that life give him something grand. He was grateful simply to walk, to breathe, to smile. And sometimes, when he heard someone complain about how dull life was, he would just smile softly and say, "Maybe you just need to go outside and take a walk under the sunlight. You'll understand a lot. From the silence of that hospital room, a new person had been born inside him. Not someone else, but John himself, with a heart more grateful, gentler, and freer than ever before. A few months later, John's life slowly returned to normal. He still went to work, still sat in the same familiar office, still heard the tapping of keyboards and the long Monday morning meetings. But within all those seemingly unchanged things, he felt something entirely different. It wasn't the world that had changed, it was him. Every morning, John left home 10 minutes earlier than before. He took the same old street where sunlight streamed through the trees and shimmered across the windows. In the past, he used to walk quickly with his head down, never noticing. Now, he often looked up at the sky, sometimes pausing just to breathe and feel the wind brush against his cheek. He understood now that happiness wasn't a destination. It was right here, in this very moment, in the ability to walk, to breathe, to feel warmth in his chest, to see sunlight fall gently across the road. The things he once called ordinary had become the most precious of all. In the evenings after work, John walked slower than everyone else. The city was still noisy, the traffic still hurried, but his heart was calm. He thought, perhaps everyone needs to stop once in a while, to remember that simply being alive is already a gift. As he walked down the sunlit street, John smiled softly. The light fell across his shoulders, warm and tender. He closed his eyes for a moment, felt his breath, deep and steady. There was nothing extraordinary, nothing grand, just an ordinary afternoon, and to him, that was happiness. Sometimes, life has to make us stop, just so we can notice the precious things that have always been right beside us. Happiness isn't found at the destination, nor hidden in grand achievements. It lives quietly within the simplest moments. A slow breath, an unhurried step, or a gentle ray of sunlight resting on your shoulder. When we learn to pause, to look deeply, and to truly feel, we realize the ordinary things are, in truth, the most extraordinary. Thank you for listening to today's story. See you again in the next videos, where together we'll keep discovering the small moments that make our hearts warm again.